Okay, this morning we've got, the class is kind of packed with the material, so we've got two videos, but sandwiched in between, I'm going to share some commentary related to the second video. The content today is going to be, we're going to have a small video finishing up the whole subject of evangelizing. That'll be the first video, and then after that we'll talk about worship and the liturgy. The other thing I want to share with you, you've got two sets of handouts. I want to share with you, we never know how many people are going to be here today. So there's usually about 60 to 65 copies I got. If somebody needs one and you don't have one, you can email me or text me, get that information after the phone, and I'll be happy to send you the PDF copies, or they're actually Word documents. So anyway, I just want to share one thing on the first video talks about is a little bit about evangelizing. And I want to share with you part of the material in preparing for this class today. Talked about what evangelizing is. I want to share with you that Father Alexander Schmemann is somebody I'm going to share with you at the end of some material. But he was involved. He was a proto-presbyter, and I guess I experienced, let's just say, in preparing, sort of joyful tears of gratitude because Father Schmemann, back in the 1970 or so, was involved with the formation of the OCA, Orthodox Church in America, which became a separate jurisdiction. They call it autocephalous, where they have the separate bishop. But that was a mission outreach by the Russian Orthodox Church to reach the American English-speaking people like myself. So Father Schmemann was involved with, again, the formation of OCA back then, and that's how I became chrismated, was through an OCA parish in Titusville. So the first video is going to talk about, again, a small one about evangelizing from one of our priests.
So regarding Orthodoxy and evangelism, spreading the faith, Orthodoxy has a missionary component and has missionaries, has a missionary center. Has a focus on missions and growing the faith. But Orthodoxy comes from all of Russia converted to Orthodoxy. The whole Rus land and people, Greeks, where they found Christ and they're the church. You can't think of really evangelization happening in some of the places where Orthodoxy, where the actual roots of Orthodoxy are. It's a reference to your thing. It's fine. It's that's the place where Orthodoxy is. In America, in a plural society with immigration, it's different. And evangelism of the Orthodox Church is living the faith. Doesn't mean that there shouldn't be outreach and inviting people. I mean, anything we do, we invite people. We just did a bake sale. We invited all the neighbors. We told all the neighbors to come, all these people. And the hope really isn't to sell brownies. The hope is they see that we're their neighbors. We don't have it's not a trick though. It wasn't you thought you were buying brownies, but now you have to listen to us do the liturgy or something. It's not like that. But people are interested. So I would say there's two ways to answer this question. There's one, on the personal level, how do I share my faith? And then there's how does the church share the faith? On a personal level, I think it's really easy, partially because I'm always wearing this. So I go into a restaurant, everybody's like, oh, the priest is buying, a salad or whatever he's doing, so people know I'm a priest, Oftentimes, actually, it leads to people coming up to me and saying, will you pray for me? I have surgery or I'm in trouble or whatever. So one time I met one of our parishioners as a police officer, and we were at a Starbucks or something, and someone came up and I'm like, this is so fun. For them, there's this priest and this cop, they don't know who they should talk to first or something. But I think as lay people, it's just living the faith. It is living the faith and not having a separate life, not having I do my faith at church, but here we got to get ahead or something. It's I own a business. How do I run it faithfully as a Christian? That's how you share the faith. I have employees, I have a boss, I have coworkers. Am I joking around coarsely, or am I living the faith? And it's just being yourself all the time, a faithful Christian all the time, and inviting people to things and talking about things. And no, I don't want to go drinking on Friday night. We try to keep a fast on Fridays. It's the day the Lord died on the cross. We kind of hold it all almost the entire year. So, and it's just living in the light of God. And then sharing things, I met a guy, actually I went to a friend's birthday party. She turned 60 and she had a birthday party and I went. Actually, it was on a Saturday night. And of course I'm in this, I don't wear like shorts and a t-shirt, so I'm in my cassock, I go. And this guy came up and he said, you're Orthodox? Are you Orthodox? I'm like, yeah, Orthodox. And he goes, we have Orthodox friends that keep giving me books. He goes, I probably have a library of books. I'm like, you've got great friends. These Orthodox friends of his are reading stuff they think is great, whatever it is, and they're saying, I'm going to get an extra copy for our friend because I love this guy. It'd be great if he read this. I always say, like, people come here, like, talking about like giving people books or like sharing your faith. Like, I would say the main goal, forgive me, this may be wrong, so I'm sure you'll get some text if it's wrong. Like, the main goal shouldn't be like, I've got to figure out how to convert them to Orthodoxy. The main goal is I'm going to share my life and my love and my faith with them. And the Lord use it to draw them closer to him. Like, that's the goal. I happen to think like that happens easiest and best in the Orthodox Church. Like, that's why I'm sitting, this is what happened to me, So like, but I don't think the main goal is like, how do I can talk this guy into Orthodoxy? It's like, how do I share something that would draw them closer to the Lord, So it's not going to be, I don't even want to mention anything, but it's going to be Orthodox material. It's going to be Orthodox stuff. It's going to be come and see this, or you have to come to Pascha with us. It starts in the middle of the night and goes all night long. You've got to see this. You've got to be there. It's like to experience things. And I think the Orthodox Church, like so personal, that was personal. And just like on an upper, like higher level, I think it's the Orthodox Church not being just like a club, to stop being kind of like either a club that's around kind of an ethnicity or something, but just to be the actual church, to be in a place and to pray the prayers and to love the people that come, and to on another level, we send missionaries to different places. We run orphanages and all kinds of things in Mexico, very beautiful Project Mexico, and in Guatemala and many other places, not just those two. And things going out, all over the world, and like relief organizations and missionary organizations and all this that's happening. But I think it's primarily done in America by Orthodoxy not joining the way of the world. It's like just following what's been handed down and being faithful to it. And it's alive. Like, it's not stagnant or boring or whatever. It's alive. And so while the other churches are embracing the world, maybe I shouldn't say it so hard, while some churches, or while that has happened, Orthodoxy is just staying the course. It's not like Orthodoxy is like radically conservative. It's like Orthodoxy is just the church. So if Orthodoxy remains true, that's our whole program, and then that becomes a big voice, when you're not for gay marriage or something, you become like this radical crazy person. It's like, well, we've never had it before. We don't understand why anybody would do that. It's not what we do. So this is like the church. It's like if the church just is herself, that's it. Like I think that's the whole program. And then we send missionaries out to share that, and we have programs and do different things. But for us, like the main thing isn't a program. It really isn't like a program. It really is going to the local church and praying the prayers, and that becomes a radical like statement, and people are hungry. They're hungry for the Lord. They're hungry for something that's transcendent and stable. It's not moving. It's not going somewhere. It's not going to become something weird, and the gates of hell, will not prevail against it, is just going.
Okay, the next one deals with worship. What does Christian worship look like? One of the handouts I gave you is from a book by Father Schmemann that's a very old book. I found it in my library. I read years ago, and it was neat to rediscover it. But it's called For the Life of the World. And in the chapter 2, he talks about the liturgy and the Eucharist. And so I just wanted to share some highlights of the handout. So he talks about how the journey begins when Christians leave their homes and beds. And he says they leave indeed their life in this present and concrete world. And then he says they're on their way now to constitute the church. He says, or to be more exact, to be transformed into the church of God. He says they have been individuals, he says, but now they've been called to come together in one place, their very world with them, and to be more than they were, a new community with a new life. The purpose is to fulfill the church. And that means to make present the one in whom all things are at their end and all things are at their beginning. And then he says the liturgy begins then as a real separation from the world. In our attempt to make Christianity appeal to the man on the street, we often minimize or even completely forgotten this necessary separation. And then at the end, he says the early Christians realized that in order to become the temple of the Holy Spirit, they must ascend to heaven where Christ has ascended. He says they realized also that this ascension was the very condition of their mission in the world, of their ministry in the world, to the world. He says they brought no programs, no theories, as the priest said here, but wherever they went, the seeds of the kingdom sprouted, faith was kindled, life was transfigured, things impossible made possible. They were witnesses, and when they were asked, whence shines this light? Where is the source of power? They knew what to answer. So it says to leave and to come, this is the beginning, the starting point of the sacrament, the condition of its transforming power and reality. So when I was reading through this material, I'm trying to visualize, okay, when I go to church, I get in my car, what's my mind thinking? What am I visualizing? So this helped me in sort of renew my thinking when I get in the car and go and I'm leaving home, how to visualize what I'm going to go experience and be part of, all of us. So it, like I said, brought tears of joy to me to give me a new perspective that instead of like I'm going to church and I just pass this person, they're going slow or whatever, they're going fast, just to have a different thought process, both on the way here and while we're here. So just wanted to share that with you. Now we're going to watch this second video where Father Zechariah Lynch talks about what's Christian worship look like.
Well, it's in the name. We call it the divine liturgy or offering, the worship offering. And it truly comes because it comes from God. It really does. And that's, again, anyone who studies the divine liturgy with love and reverence, and St. Seraphim brings this out very substantially, that it is something that comes directly from, that's what makes Orthodox Christianity unique. I'm not trying to make up my own worship, and worship isn't ultimately based on my likes and dislikes, but I'm called to enter into something that transcends me, right? That I enter into something that is eternal. And if we look again back to scriptural worship, when we look at the visions of heaven that we see in the scriptures, in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, and we see reflected, we don't see rock bands, we don't see these things. And that's nice if you like music, fine. There's a place for it, but not in the ultimate worship of God. And that's the thing. There's a setting apart. There's a setting apart as sacred, setting apart as holy, the worship that is dedicated strictly to God alone. And now, obviously, in the rest of my life, you can take up your guitar, you can sing some songs, fine. There's a place for that. I just don't bring that into the church. In the sense that when we look back to the scriptures, we look at the heavens, what are the angels doing? What are the 24 elders doing? They're singing hymns. Actually, they repeat hymns. And then they're falling down, prostrate before the throne of God. They're showing reverence and awe. Holy, 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 Lord of Sabaoth. Heaven and earth is full of thy glory. And this is what we see the seraphim and the cherubim doing. When Moses went up on Mount Sinai, this is the things that the Christians were innately aware of. Of course, he imaged it in the Old Testament, so it wasn't the perfect image yet. But when he went up on Mount Sinai, God gave him a vision of heavenly worship. That's why in Exodus, and then it's repeated in Hebrews, the Lord commands him, make sure that you make everything according to that image, that type that you beheld on the mountain, right? So it wasn't something Moses just made up. I think the children of Israel are really going to dig this. Because what happened was the children of Israel, we see this kind of contrast when Moses is on Mount Sinai receiving heavenly worship. The children of Israel are down in the plain. He's been gone a long time, gee whiz. And then what do? They make up their own worship. They make up their own worship according to their own passions, according to their own things, and the golden calf and all of this happens. So there is contrasted there a very important thing, that we must follow heavenly worship and not kind of what we would find as the way we would like to worship, right? And so throughout the scriptures, again, throughout this, in the book of Revelation, really, if you're reading it, having been in the Orthodox liturgy, having lived in the worship of the Orthodox Church, of the Christian Church, really, that's what it is. This is just Christian worship. That's simply what it is. But when you approach the book of Revelation, there's so much that you say, oh yeah, this is what we're doing in church. This is what we're doing in church. Why? Because it's not just a book of some cryptic book about the last days, I mean, it is the book of the last age, which St. John tells us. He says, my brethren, we are in the last times. That's St. John the theologian telling us, as soon as Christ ascended, we entered into the last age of the earth. And how long that last age is going to last, God knows. And the book of Revelation is ultimately the book of the last age. And of course, there'll be the last days of that last age, inevitably. But the important thing to understand when we approach it, that the book of Revelation, one of the phenomenal things is that if you see after a lot of the cyclical happenings in the book of Revelation, the climax is worship in heaven. Climax is worship in heaven. And so what did the apostles do? They took this divine revelation that they had seen. Paul was taken up into the heavenlies, right? St. James, the brother of our Lord, St. John, the theologian, of course, in continuity with that ancient Hebraic Mosaic revelation of worship. And we put Christ in all of that, the fullness of all those things, and we have the divine revelation of Christian worship. And so for us, that's vital. That's absolutely vital. God help us. The thing is when we go to worship God, I'm not going to be entertained. I'm going to worship God. And in Orthodoxy, we're not going to try to entertain you. That's not the point. The point is the transformation of the human heart. The point is that I could quiet my mind. In our times, we're so scattered. We're so fragmented. We're really, okay, thank God here we are. Someone's watching this online. The internet, I guess, has a place right now. It's part of our world. Let's use it for the good, for the good, so to speak. But in some sense, the negative effect is that we're just scrolling, we're just doing these things, and we get so fragmented. And that ability to collect ourselves as modern man is all the more difficult. But Orthodox worship calls us to collect. And all of a sudden, when I'm quieting my heart, when I'm trying to quiet my heart, myself, and bring myself back together, all of a sudden I notice all of the thoughts, all of the swirling of my own being. And then a lot of people flee. I don't want to do that. So I'm seeking constant entertainment. Whereas Orthodoxy is asking us, no, quiet. Because unless you're quiet, you're going to miss that still small voice of the Lord speaking, right? And so you have to quiet your soul. Hezekiah is at the heart of Christianity. Right? Unless we're quieting ourselves. And in the Divine Liturgy, we're singing a lot of hymns, a lot of all based on Scripture, right? We're interceding for the whole world, but really at the heart of all of those hymns and all that motion is that Hezekiah. And so I think when a lot of people, that's why, again, Protestantism, I'm not trying to bash someone. It's not the point. It's compare and contrast. But really, if we look, the tragedy is, and we have to understand a little bit of history. Nothing happens. Protestantism was the first one. Before Protestantism, you never faced the people. The minister in Orthodoxy, they're facing the altar. We all face east together. We're all worshiping God together. That's the ancient tradition. Protestantism changed that. Now, it might seem small, but that's a fundamental change. Because when my back is to everyone in the congregation, except for when I'm proclaiming the gospel or giving a sermon or turning to give certain blessings. Otherwise, because then the message is, you know what, people? It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about all of us, right? Together, and the priest has been the one ordained. The priesthood is a sacrament. It's a mystery of the church. He's it's very deep. We won't get into the priesthood right now, I guess. But for the good order, he's leading, as it were, the ship that he's been appointed over, right? As a shepherd of Christ. But it's not, we're all here to worship. All here to worship. Now in Protestantism, they changed that. They changed the pulpit, and everything's directed towards the people. Implicit in that is, this is about you. And it becomes about, teaching, which is teaching that has a place, but teaching isn't worship, right? And then it became about, especially in modern times, it really is very modern, all of the bands and even classic Protestantism. If you look at classic Protestant hymns, there's actually some very beautiful ones, very heartfelt, searching for that longing for Christ. And I think we can acknowledge that in a positive sense. And I think the tragedy of modern Protestantism is that it's completely even abandoned those things that it once at least still maintained. And now it's reduced to entertainment and, a teaching time. Which again, teaching, there's a point for that, but teaching is not worship. It's not worship. And in my mind, is not is important, but it's also, again, the focus on teaching comes about because of Protestantism's being born out of rationalism. Really, it is. It's in rationalism gave birth to emotionalism to try to balance those two things out. Whereas in Orthodoxy, it becomes the connecting of the mind and the heart, right? And then when the mind is in the heart, we can function. In Orthodox Christian worship. That's the point. And then tragically, really tragically, the Roman Catholic Church, again, using that word just generally, not specifically and theologically, turned to their altars in Vatican II, followed the Protestant model. And now the only Christian, again, it's kind of just speaking generally, not specifically like theologically, in that very specific sense, the only Christian group that is, maintains that ancient custom. And that's very important. It's very important. Reflecting back on my time in evangelical, charismatic Protestantism, one of the things, again, if there's, friends listening that are of that kind of expression, then hear me out. Then, really, if you look at it, the basis of it is your likes and dislikes. I realize when I'm going to church, I'm going there, I like what they're doing better. I don't like, and when you talk to people most of the time, that's what it was. Oh, I like this. I don't like that. I like their style of music better than their style of music, right? So all of a sudden, you have Christian worship based on me. It's not about me. It's not about me. and my likes. I might like Johnny Cash. You might not like Johnny Cash. I might like Bob Dylan, and someone might think Bob Dylan is terrible. That has nothing to do with, that's just likes and dislikes of humanity. But when it comes to worship, it has to be something that's challenging that very root of my ego, right? Which is the opposite of humility, right? And so divine worship is calibrated to challenge that in us. And it's even more difficult, I think, for modern man, of which I'm part. I'm not excluded from that by any means. And I think, though, ultimately, that's where transformation truly happens. Because when it's based on likes and dislikes, it becomes self-help with Jesus. And Christianity is not self-help with Jesus. It's not that. It's not motivational speaking, but with Jesus. It's not rock music with Jesus, or rap music with Jesus, or whatever it might be, country music with Jesus. All we do is we add a little Jesus to the end, and okay, maybe I need some motivational something or other. Fine, we're not saying that's necessary, but is that worship? That's where we're saying, no, it's not worship. It's not worship, it's just not. Because when I approach God, I approach him. Christ says this, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. The divine liturgy is a revelation of Jesus Christ, indisputably so, indisputably practiced from the very ancient times of Christianity and preserved for us, those that want to take part in it, alive and continuous to this very day. And that's what we're called into. And then that way, when I come into Orthodox worship, I'm stepping upon the way of Christ, not the way I like it, but the way that God has revealed it for me to worship and enter into. And in doing so, I find freedom. That's why Christ says, if you're going to be a Christian, take up your cross and follow after me. The cross is not pleasant. The cross challenges me. The cross, makes me consider even certain of my own dispositions, certain of my likes and dislikes. It's supposed to be that. Christianity's challenging the problem, generally speaking. I know it was interesting. I'll just note it was to Protestant folks out there. Maybe someone sent it to me. I'm a little out of touch, but there was some huge men's conference, I guess, in Missouri, Kansas City, I believe, and I forget all the big hitter Protestant names. Mike Lindahl, I think, might have been one of them. But anyway, they opened up this program with some guy, just look at it. Let's just look at it. This conference is just as kind of an example. Big warehouse. Behind all the speakers is this big graphic of a motorcycle. Nothing to designate that it's Christian. And they open up with this very strange, and I agree. I really have nothing invested in it because I'm not a Protestant anymore. But they open up with this crazy, pretty strong, obviously he was a pretty strong guy, but he gets up on stage, rips his shirt off, and they have a pole, and he's a sword swallower, and he climbs up this pole doing all these really strange kind of acrobatics. Then, of course, the big thing is that one of the speakers was kind of disturbed, and maybe rightly so. Maybe he was kind of good to start asking, is this really Christianity? Is this really what we're doing? Just entertainment now? This is a men's con. Where's the challenge? Where's that? In authentic Christianity will challenge you as a person, be a man or a woman, right? But it will challenge you at every turn. That's the ascetic life. And because Protestantism is no longer ascetic at all, it's losing that complete challenge to my ego, which has to die on the cross with Christ so that I can live in his resurrection. But if there's no cross, if there's no asceticism, which is fundamental to Christianity, right? It was even somewhat understood by the early Protestant reformers and completely not lost now in modern Protestantism. In fact, we could say modern Protestantism is anti-ascetical, right? And they're groping, and that's, again, not to bash, but then they're groping for things because they've lost that substance. And Orthodox, the true Christian, come back to true Christian worship. We invite everyone back to that. And it's always confronting the ego. And it's always a dying in Christ so that I might live in him. And not just nice words, not just something we're saying, but you when you start encountering Christ in the divine liturgy, then this thing becomes very tangible and very real. So God help us. Again, all that to say, they think if someone wants substance, but maybe some people don't want substance. I think maybe sometimes we want to feel like we're worshiping God when, God knows the heart of every person. I'm not trying to be a discerner of any one particular person's heart, but speaking sometimes as a system, maybe in reality, all we're doing is putting up golden calves and worshiping them instead of waiting for Moses to come to us with the true revelation of God.
Just a couple things about the calendar. The next 2 weeks we won't have class because we've got the Tables Extraordinary event. Next weekend they're doing preparation for it. The following weekend is the event. So we resume back on the 16th of February. I think Pamela is going to be presenting that week. And then I'll follow after that. I'm sorry, did you have something?
That's good. Just one comment on what Bonnie said is someone had asked, why do young people leave the church? And I think that we have a very consumer mindset, in which Father Lynn talked about, and Father Josiah talks about cafeteria Christianity, where we line up, it's like, I do want this, I don't want this, and we kind of pick and choose. And we become the arbiters of truth, essentially. It's our conception of what is good and right, rather than assimilating to something that is timeless. And I think when we come to church to get something out of it, even to take communion, to get communion, to experience something, when that is the priority, it falls flat. Meaning when we don't feel something, we begin to doubt, we begin to wonder, and it's not us coming to get something from church, but to participate in something that is beyond us. And when we actually do begin to participate in that and experience it, we realize that it's far more beautiful than we could have ever imagined. And thank God it's not limited to our conception of what is good and right. It's something that's far, far more beautiful. So.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I want to add on to that. It's like there are younger people who have a consumer mindset, but at the time there are younger people who realize what is pretentious and what is real and what is not. That's why a lot of younger folk head back to Orthodoxy, because of the fact that when they see a lot of these modern day Protestant churches, they look at it and say, is this supposed to be a church or is this supposed to be a circus? Because you're supposed to be there for God, not for yourself. And that's what people fail to understand. We're not there to be, God is not there to be in our favor, we're there to be in God's favor. And that's what the modern day fails to understand. They complain about people using the identity for their feelings, but then they do the same thing and they don't realize that. It's basically like an abusive alcoholic father getting mad at an abusive alcoholic son who does the same thing. They don't realize that until they see where they've gone too far. And that's so far why modern day Protestantism has fallen apart, because they lack the priesthood, they lack the sacraments, they lack all the structure right there, and they don't see the errors in ways, because they're like the world they criticize, they're also using their feelings.
Well, Father C mentioned today, I guess, in terms of talking about the enthronement of Sebastianos, but about the fullness of Christ. So that's my experience as a becoming Orthodox. There were some great things in the non-Orthodox world, but the fullness of Christ is one of the many things that drew me to Orthodoxy. So